From what I've gathered, this is the main entrance, as you can see. So basically, if you want to enter the Ugly Tuna Saloon, if you wanted to enter the Ugly Tuna Saloon, you would have to come through those doors and, either take the elevator or take the stairs. And yeah, this is basically where the bar is located. And we are live. Welcome back, everyone who is listening to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast, episode number 7. My name is Juras. As usual, I'm joined by my co-host Glenn. How are you feeling, my friend?
Hi, I'm holding in there. Hey, everybody. California is in the middle of burning down, apparently. So I'm just happy to have a day without smoke all over the place.
Oh yeah. Is it really that bad around your general vicinity?
So I've been lucky this week that the smoke has not been bad because the wind happens to be blowing a different direction. But the wind is outrageous. The wind is blowing at like 50 miles an hour some days, which that combined with humidity under 10% is just making things just very volatile. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's hope for the best for California because these fires have been crazy as of late. And without any further ado, let's jump into today's topic. So today we are discussing the mysterious disappearance of Brian Schaeffer that happened in 2006 on April 1st. So Brian Schaeffer, I'm gonna jump in quickly to the picture of Brian. So this is Brian. Brian was 27 years of age at the time of his disappearance. He was a med school student, so he was a smart kid. He was 27 years of age and he basically disappeared on April 1st in Columbus, Ohio, while he was out, just basically celebrating the beginning of university break or something like that. And so he went bar hopping in many different bars and pubs, I guess, and then essentially he went to the Ugly Tuna Saloon. That's basically this bar right here that you are seeing on the Google Maps right now. And we have a footage. I will quickly show you the footage. So on the bottom right side, or the bottom right corner, you can see Brian basically going back to the back entrance, I guess, back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon. And this is the last footage, or the last time anyone has any sort of a visual on Brian. And after that he just went missing. So Glenn, could you give our audience a little more in-depth on what actually happened?
Sure. So some background about Brian. Brian is looks like he's about 3 years older than I. He was born in 1979. He's a resident of Ohio. He was one of 2 children. He got a degree, a bachelor's of science in microbiology, and then proceeded to go on to medical school.
Yep.
And it was while he was at medical school, and actually it was during spring break when he disappeared. So he had presumably stayed up all night to do finals. He went out to a dinner with his father, and his father was kind of worried about him. His father's name is Randy. His father was concerned that he was a little bit looked a little bit weary, I guess, or fatigued. But he was Brian was supposed to go out with a friend that night bar hopping, and his father was not
with
Yeah, I was a little worried, right?
right with William Florence, and this guy in particular, played a big part in the development of many theories to what actually happened to Brian. But we will discuss that a little bit later. So another detail that we should definitely mention is that Brian Schaeffer's mother, Renee Schaeffer, as you can see in the picture, she tragically passed away. It was, I believe, a few weeks or a few months right before Brian's disappearance. So she passed away from cancer. So that was definitely unfortunate. God bless them. So yeah, so this is another detail worth mentioning. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Critically, it was about 3 weeks before his disappearance,
right,
which it was just interesting. Actually, that particular detail was really interesting to me because I was very familiar with this case. I'm really excited to be talking about it today because it is such a mysterious case, and you would hope this is a solvable mystery at some point. But yeah,
of course,
to lose probably one of the most important people in your life um, at a relatively young age. And
right.
only 3 weeks before you're taking tests and doing all these other things. I mean, that just must have been just enormously devastating. And
Yeah,
even though it was so apparently it was a weird kind of a rare form of cancer. I didn't get a chance to look it up, but it's my myelod myelodysplasia.
right. I
Yeah,
haven't really, I haven't really looked into the actual type of the cancer. However, during my research, it was stated that, at least by Brian's friends, that he actually took the loss fairly well, or at least he was not showing a lot of signs of. Obviously, he was, showing signs of grief, but he didn't really suggest that he would do like some sort of self-harm or anything like that. So uh,
yeah.
at least it seemed that he was taking the loss fairly well, as well as you can, I guess, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, he didn't seem despondent, but it still makes me wonder. I mean, a loss of anybody. I've lost coworkers or
Right,
close friends, and it messed with me for a long time. So part of me is like, maybe he was just still in shock
of
or in
course,
the
of
in
course.
in,
Yeah,
in one of those other stages of grief. I mean, 3 weeks is nothing.
yeah,
So yeah, so we so there's a lot of interesting stuff about what happened with this. So he went out with that friend, William Florence, also known as Clint Florence,
yeah,
is his nickname. And then they were joined by a woman named Meredith Reed, who was a friend of William Florence. And they went bar hopping,
right.
and they specifically went to, was the Ugly Tuna Saloon first? Is that
Yeah,
right?
yep. So they basically, essentially, the first pub that they visit at 9 p.m. was it? Yeah, it was 9. So Brian, and his friend William Florence, they essentially went to the Ugly Tuna Saloon at first, and so they took a few shots, and after doing that, they actually decided to go bar hopping. And I'm gonna pull out this map right here. So basically, as you can see, this is the building of the Ugly Tuna Saloon right here, as you can see on the Google Maps. And Brian and his friend William Florence, they actually went on, I believe, 2 mile bar hopping spree. So this is essentially the route that they have taken while, going through bars and taking shots at each bar, just, I guess, having a good time, relaxing for a little bit before the exam. So yeah, so this is, as you can see, this is the arena district right here. So this is when this is, I don't really know the timeline, how long it took them to get here, but it probably took like at least an hour, especially if you're like bar hopping. And actually, after they reached the arena district, Florence, the friend of Brian that tagged along with him on this route, he actually called his friend Meredith Reed, right? Yeah, that was her name, and she took them. She just, I think she had a car, so she drove to Brian and William, and then she gave them a ride back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon. So they essentially went to the Ugly Tuna Saloon at first, then they decided to go bar hopping, and then a few hours later, or like 2 hours later, they went back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon. And yeah, so essentially around the same time we have like this footage, the last time Brian was captured on tape. So yeah, so that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, so that what was odd was that he he was in the bar, the Ugly Tuna Saloon, and it was, gosh, like here's the thing: the timeline moves around a lot, and this is where I really try to dig into a couple different sources. So Wikipedia, of course, I think is good in terms of like details everybody agrees on.
Right.
And then and Wikipedia is pretty careful about not letting things creep in that are not substantiated. So
Yeah.
I was also doing research on Reddit, and it's interesting because there's a couple different, like, the timeline gets a little hazy if you start to bring in these other sources. But
Okay.
it looks like that somewhere between 1 to 2, Brian had been drinking with Florence and Reed inside the bar. At some point, he makes an excuse to go outside, and I think he wanted to maybe get some fresh air. And he goes, and he's on video, the video you showed, and then there was another video where he's talking to some young ladies, and no wonder he was seems like a gregarious, very very attractive person, who seemed to have a lot going for him. So no wonder. And then he went back inside the bar on camera, and then no one ever saw him again. At least no one that's admitted to it. So
Right.
and so what was really interesting was, his friends, they were trying to get a hold of him. They're trying to call him. They weren't really sure where he went. He had said at one point that he wanted to go talk to the band. Is something I read at one point. So they thought maybe he had done that. And at some point they thought, oh, maybe he just wandered off home because he only lived a couple blocks down the street.
Right.
Yeah, really relatively close. So they didn't really, they weren't in emergency mode yet. What flipped everybody into emergency mode and missing person mode was that Brian had a fiance. Her name is Alexis Wagner, and they were actually due to go on a flight to Miami. I think it was the following Monday. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that, like the next week.
Yeah.
Briefly.
Yeah. And he didn't show up.
Yeah.
And she hadn't heard from him. And of course, in that kind of situation, that's when they finally realized there was something seriously wrong. So that's where we start to get into some of the weird details of the case. So if we look at here's some other details before we get into theories to call out is, even though Brian was going to medical school, he had actually expressed a strong desire to do a different career path, which was to make music along the lines of Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah.
And that's pretty different from going to medical school. So it's interesting that that's out there. That's something worth considering later when we talk about the theories. We already mentioned his mother had passed recently. Interestingly and tragically, his father then also passed some years later in a freak accident, getting killed by a falling branch. So it's sort of there's a lot of tragedy going on in the family. So the police get involved. They start looking through the tapes, and they're like, gosh, what could have happened to this person? Where could Brian have gone? And the problem is there were only 2 entrances to this building. Now,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, full disclosure, the building was under construction, including where the freight elevator / kind of emergency exit was. But that also was covered with a surveillance cam.
Right. So basically, just to get our viewers, our audience up to date. So from what I've gathered, this is the main entrance, as you can see. So basically, if you want to enter the Ugly Tuna Saloon, if you wanted to enter the Ugly Tuna Saloon, you would have to come through those doors and either take the elevator or take the stairs. And yeah, this is basically where the bar is located, and the back the back room entrance, I guess the staff entrance, I'm supposing was this area right here. Obviously, I'm assuming that in 2006, this area in particular probably looked a little bit different than it does right now, because
Yeah.
it clearly states that the exit is right here. So I'm assuming that, as you can see, like from this footage, that when Brian is walking backwards somewhere, so I'm assuming he's one of the theories are that he actually took the door, one of these doors, or something like that. Obviously I could be wrong, but that's what I've gathered.
That was like one of the most interesting things when I was researching this, was trying to understand, and that's I think where there's a lot of statements from a lot of people about what state the building was in. So what I'm not clear on is because that yellow gateway looks fairly recent. It's hard to tell if that was always there and just had a nice facelift, or if they were in the process of building it.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it was yellow, because I don't have the picture right now, but I've looked up somewhere that the door of the back entrance was black, and the surrounding areas was black. So I think they just remodeled, redecorated, I guess you could say, but it was definitely different than it looks, in 2017. But yeah, who's to say if he actually took one of these doors? I guess it's one of the theories. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think, and this is where I think because there's so much. Once there's construction on an area, and once the actual building changes or things move, sometimes it's hard to pin down what's going on. I guess there's a movie theater next door. I'm not clear if that movie theater was there at the time of the disappearance in 2006.
Yeah.
But what was, and that's because my impression when I'd heard about this was that the rear exit was actually at the rear of the restaurant. So like in the United States, as most countries, has pretty severe, or I would say strict, fire codes about exits and establishments, because there's just been so many tragedies with people getting trapped in burning buildings,
Right.
especially clubs and bars. So yeah, as I understood it, there was some kind of back exit / freight elevator area that went down and then it opened up into a construction site on the first story, potentially adjacent and maybe over from the bar. And it's a little bit confusing. When I read on Reddit, there was a lot of debate back and forth from people that like maybe lived in the area, people had been to the bar, and they were kind of trying to remember like what the setup was at the time. And of course, when we look at pictures now, sometimes it's hard to tell just how much has changed in the 14 years or so since this happened. But yeah, it was pretty odd, and interestingly, the police have not released that footage of that area. So there actually was a camera on the construction site. Makes sense, because construction materials get stolen all the time, and just for security reasons.
Right.
So that's very,
yeah. And just another thing worthy of mentioning is that Columbus has the most surveillance cameras in all of Ohio. More than like all the other cities combined, or something crazy like that. So Columbus Columbus has a whole lot of footage. Surveillance cameras that are constantly taking footage of what's actually happening. So one of the main efforts of the police during the investigation was going in surrounding bars, surrounding establishments, and looking through their footage, and they actually didn't see Brian anywhere, so they couldn't really locate him. And another interesting thing is that the police actually, they theorized that if, for say, if Brian was, if he actually decided to start, a new life, start a band, as you've mentioned earlier, he could have just, changed his outfit, or like put like some sort of a hat on, and that could be one of the reasons to do that. He just lost his mother, and he didn't really seem that he was that much into the whole med school. So maybe that's
Yeah,
what he did.
I found something. One of the pages I saw on the web had much stronger wording than the Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
So one of the articles I read had claimed, and once again, this is only one source,
Okay.
that he had actually told friends that the med school thing was a stopgap, like not really what he was going to do, which is very interesting because of course it's so hard to get into medical school, and you really have to have a pretty high IQ to get through medical school, and medical school is enormously expensive. I think it costs, by the time you're done, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million.
Right.
I could be wrong, but I believe that's what I heard.
Yeah.
For dentists, I'm fairly sure that's the case. So for a doctor who's not a dentist, I think it's probably.
I mean, seems logical because they do like probably earn that $500,000 in like 5 or 6 years. So it probably seems rational, but at the same time, I'm not really certain that that's the case for Michael, because he seemed like he had a close relationship with his father, also with his brother Derek Schaeffer, that we have not mentioned yet, who is the only immediate family member who's still left alive, essentially, if Brian is actually dead. So yeah, Brian seemed like he was living like he had a fairly good life. He obviously he tragedies like his mother passing had happened, but he seemed like he had a really cool fiance. He had friends. He had like a career in front of him in the medical world. So I think it's a far-fetched theory that he actually just decided to start a new life. Like, to me, that like, I'm sort of not with that theory.
Oh, good. This will be the first time we butt heads a little bit on the show. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's because I'm. This is one of the times where I'm leaning a little bit more towards that, but I'll get into why.
Okay.
But I agree with you. I'll go even further, I think, than what you describe.
Okay.
I'll say, and this is not saying anything about my own preferences, but I would say just by any reasonable measure, he was a catch. So for anybody, male or female, that would want to find a good, let's say, partner in life, he was tall. He's 6'2". He's handsome. Some of the photos, it's funny because I saw a photo of him where he had his shirt off and he was posing with his muscles, and he was like pretty buff, pretty built. He's
I've
smart.
seen that photo. Yeah.
Yeah, so can you imagine? He's got good looks. He's not fat. He was only 170 pounds, which at 6'2" is pretty thin. That's fairly thin. But he also had muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's like what I weighed in high school. So I'm also the same height, and now I'm like 60 pounds heavier. But I remember being that weight. But I think given the photo I saw, the way his weight was distributed, it was he had a very muscular build, or at least a fit build. So yeah, I mean, so a guy that already has a good degree, is about to become a doctor, is tall, handsome, has a fiance already, has his life ahead of him, but has also experienced some very recent tragedy. There's an interesting mixture here of like what could have happened. And it's worth mentioning also that, of course, as the search got going, they really racked up the efforts. I mean, we'll later on, we're going to show some materials, some sites that are still out there that, unlike our case about Michael Negrete, it looks like there's still a pretty strong outreach in terms of trying to get Brian. And I think some of that maybe is because, his disappearance happened a little deeper into the internet age, while Michael, disappeared a little early into the internet age. But yeah, it certainly is missed. And like you said, his poor brother, Derek, who now, as far as he knows is the only surviving member of his, nuclear family.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Really, really unfortunate. That
Yeah.
that's just you. I definitely feel a lot. I just actually like researching this case. I really felt bad for like for Derek, and then essentially like for Brian as well, and then for Randy Schaeffer. Because they lost Renee Schaeffer, the mother of the family. So it's just one of those really sad, tragic moments. I'm definitely uh, I was it was fairly difficult for me to research this case because it definitely not that I can relate or anything like that, but I just sort of imagined myself in like Brian's situation. What if I was just preparing for like really difficult tests, and some sort of tragedy happens in the family. Yeah, like I don't know where my head would be. So it's really hard to say, what Brian actually decided to do. But once again, I have like a little bit different theories that I have in mind. So oh yeah, so definitely go on with what you were saying about yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of polish it off with, his fiance, understandably, has been, one of the most vocal people in terms of finding, the person who was going to be her future husband, and bringing him back to this earth, or at least to our awareness. So yeah, I mean, interestingly and not uncommonly, since he's been missing, she had been calling his cell phone. I think A, just to see if she could find him, but also B, to see if like, I think it was actually just to comfort herself. So that just the sound. She said the sound of his voicemail um, made her feel, better hearing his voice.
Yeah.
And interestingly, one of the times she called, instead of going straight to voicemail like a mobile phone would do, when the recipient is
Right.
out of contact with the cell tower, it actually rang. It rang a couple of times, and they traced that ping, they call it. So it's just a data ping, or a cell phone
Right.
ping. Yeah, to a cell phone tower that was about 14 miles out of town. What did you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, I didn't really think much of it. Obviously, that would lead into the whole theory that he actually went and started a new life or something of that sort. But I personally think it was a glitch, because, the police, the expert, actually, they also stated that they believe that this was just some sort of a glitch in the telecommunication system, or something like that. Michael's, I mean, I'm messing up his name. Brian Schaeffer's phone, back in 2000, and like the late 2000s, he didn't have GPS, so they couldn't really track where the phone call was made from. But I think they located like the tower, what's called like the telecommunication tower or something like that. So yeah, I think they tracked it down, but I think they stated that it was a glitch, so I'm leaning towards that was probably a glitch or something like that.
Some kind of false lead. Okay, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it is pretty interesting. It's funny because even that whole thing is controversial on the Reddits about this topic, because, and this is where I look forward to our listener comments on this, because feedback, because maybe they know some things about the area, or about, like, let me give you an example, like the GPS thing you mentioned. Somebody who claimed to be closer to the technical side said that, even if you did have GPS in your phone, like we all do now on our smartphones, that the phone company could not necessarily pull that data from your phone. I don't know if that's true, because I know, maybe it is true, because I know sometimes when they do other cases where they're able to pin something on somebody because of cell phone records, I think they're using triangulation between towers. I'm not sure that they're actually like grabbing um, data, and there was no, like nowadays, like some people like me will just let Google track my location everywhere,
Right.
but that didn't exist at all back then.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a much more primitive state for the mobile world.
Yeah, right. Another thing, like, because I just spotted it on the Google map, as you can see, like we have the ugly tuna too right here. So I'm not sure, and you also heard that, because we chatted before the podcast started, that the original Ugly Tuna Saloon closed down for some reason, and they reopened it at like another area, Ugly Tuna 2. So it was, just right down the street from like the original Ugly Tuna Saloon. But then again, this picture is, from 2017, and the bar still seems open and, operational. So yeah, I don't really know what that is all about, but it would seem that this is just some random statement or like a random fact. But one of the theories floating around on the internet is that maybe Brian, he actually got like into an accident at a bar. Maybe something happened at a bar. He actually passed away. Maybe he took like some tainted drinks, or maybe some tainted drugs or something like that, and he passed away. And then maybe the owners of the Ugly Tuna Saloon, they didn't want the media attention, because that would be devastating to the club. So they just sort of done away with his body, and that would sort of explain why the security cameras didn't capture Brian getting out of the building. So that's also a case, but it's definitely really, really far-fetched. But I just want to put it out there.
Yeah, and then it's interesting because like initially when I hear that,
Right.
my gut instinct, my gut instinct is to be skeptical and to say, oh well, like part of me thinks it wouldn't be that damaging.
Yeah.
Because people die all the time. I mean, I saw some poor old lady die at Costco the other year.
Oh wow.
Yeah, just poor old lady had a heart attack and just didn't make it. But like, so part of me is like, well, deaths happen in businesses, and like, hiding a body, it would be, the owners would be getting themselves into potentially a far more serious crime by doing that. So they'd have to offset that. But then, I look at it, and when you look at people's actions, they're not always super rational. Sometimes they're made in the heat of the moment. And let's, of course, put the disclaimer out there that we are not accusing the owners of the Ugly Tuna Saloon.
Definitely. Like, yeah, definitely.
Just conjecture and theory.
Of course.
We're just trying to put the possibilities out there. If we were police detectives, like, we would have a list, and anything, no matter how irrational it sounds,
Right.
sometimes the things do not follow reasonable, like paths.
Of course, yeah. No, definitely. I'm not accusing anyone, because there's not a not a grain of proof that would suggest that what actually had happened. And I think, to cut to the chase, like, the theory that I'm probably going the most with is that I would actually disregard the fact that Brian was not captured on surveillance footage leaving the bar, because even like this surveillance footage that we have right now on the visuals, it's like, I guess, if there's like a big crowd of people leaving the bar at 2 after midnight, at the closing time of Tuna Saloon, I think it would be fairly hard to distinguish Brian from, if there was like a big crowd leaving. So I would say there's, at least in my eyes, there's like a big possibility that Brian actually left the building. Just, he wasn't distinguishable from the footage, and he sort of ran into some sort of foul play, or he got mugged or anything like that, and the perpetrators then disposed of his body, because the area surrounding the bar that we should have mentioned a little bit earlier had a fairly high crime rate, right? You've heard about this, right? So yeah, so I'm sort of leaning towards the fact that Brian probably, he was probably getting mugged or something like that, and he was 6'2", he was well built, he was maybe a little bit drunk, probably was a little bit drunk, and maybe an altercation took place, and maybe the other the perpetrators, maybe they had like a weapon or a knife, and maybe they killed him and dumped his body somewhere. And yeah, maybe that would happen. So I would, since this is such a cold case, there's no leads or anything like that, no relevant tips. So I'm sort of going with that theory that something unfortunate happened to him while he, soon after he left the bar.
I would definitely, so compared to our other episode about Michael Negrete of UCLA,
Right.
I think I would be more likely to lean towards, in this case, lean towards what you're saying, some kind of criminal or homicidal, violent altercation against him, some kind of event that was not an accident, potentially. I think I would give higher odds for Brian than Michael, for various reasons. So you mentioned the neighborhood around there at the time was a little bit higher crime. Interestingly, I didn't realize. So I'm from California, and I don't really know much about the Midwest. But it turns out Ohio is actually the highest population state of the Midwest. So not the highest population state, but in the what we consider Midwest states.
Yeah.
It actually has way more population than the neighboring states around it. And interestingly, it did have a pretty big crime problem. Once again, like not on my radar because I didn't grow up out there. Like there's kind of a stereotype in America, excuse me, that like the Midwest is kind of like all full of friendly people, and that sometimes maybe we almost get this view that like everything is more is less complicated there. But no, certainly they have their way more than their share of crime and issues. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, I believe Cleveland is in Ohio, right? And
yeah,
so I've definitely heard that Cleveland has, a pretty serious crime issue. I've never really considered Columbus to be to have like to be a dangerous city to live in. But maybe that's what's happening nowadays. Obviously it still has crime and bad things still happen there, but maybe back in the day, back in 2006, maybe the situation was a little bit different. So yeah, hence the fact that there were so many surveillance cameras, so they had to be there for a reason.
what are your thoughts? Yeah, right, that makes sense. For sure.
Yeah.
I heard also Youngstown. I listened to a podcast once where a comic was talking about growing up in Youngstown, and I think he said at one point like all of his Christmas presents were stolen, or someone stole like everything in their house while they were gone. It was like, I was like, I've never even heard of that happening before. I mean, it was pretty bad. So yeah, one question for you is,
okay,
what do you think happened to the body then?
Yeah, so this is hard. It's really hard to say, but I'm thinking that probably if an altercation did take place once Brian left, and for say he was killed, probably the perpetrators put his body in the back of like a trunk in a car, and then they probably dumped it somewhere. Like you have like the river, the what's called the uh Olentangy River, something like that. I probably butchered the name
No, me
completely.
too. Yeah, I think it might be a Native American name,
Ah,
historic. Yeah, and
yeah,
it may be hard.
that's even worse than that I butchered it. But okay, yeah, yeah. So I think maybe they dumped it inside the river, or it's really hard to say. I have no idea what actually happened to the body. Maybe Brian is still alive. So who knows?
I mean, now that you say it, it's funny because I had it kind of lower on the list of what I thought happened to Brian. But now that you walk through the scenario, I'm leaning
Right.
a little more heavily towards what you're saying. I mean, especially more so, I think, than versus like the Michael Negrete case where my opinion was more on like misadventure.
Yeah.
Do you So speaking of misadventure, so by misadventure I mean essentially having some kind of accident. Um,
Right.
that was I wanted to go through that one really quick because I know when we talked about Michael Negrete, we cited all of the construction going on at
Hmm.
UCLA, and there was a massive amount of construction.
Yep.
So that was certainly what I wanted to look at here because once again we had a case where somebody went missing, and there was construction directly adjacent to where he went missing. Now, it is important to call out that the construction was at a far smaller scale than UCLA. So my theory is that would make it much easier to do a search, or make it harder for him to kind of maybe accidentally disappear into a crevice somewhere. One
Hmm.
thing, as I'm going through that, the one thing I was trying to find and I could not find anything on it was you see this in movies all the time where someone's trying to evade the police or their captors or whatever, and they go into the bathroom and they sneak out a window, right? And that's sort of a cliche in movies. But I was thinking about it and I was like, gosh, when I was 6'2" and 170 pounds, I could fit through things that were like far thinner than of course I could fit through now at my current weight. And part of me wondered like,
Hmm.
gosh, is it possible that either he was drunk or who knows what state of mind it may have been for various reasons, or conscious or unconscious. Is it possible that he could have like fallen down maybe in a crevice between two buildings in some place that nobody ever looks like? I kept on hearing a lot of, they kept on talking about doors, and I kept on thinking to myself, gosh, doors are not the only ways that people enter and leave buildings. It's the normal way to enter and leave a building, but like a window, or there's also a balcony. Um, that's I think in some of the other photos,
Right.
historical photos of the place. And I'm like, people are like, well, on Reddit and other places, people are like, well, if he had tried to go off the balcony, people would have seen him. And like, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe people saw him and no one, there's a lot of wacky stuff going on at 2 a.m. when everyone's
Of
drunk,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
like a bar,
Definitely.
right? I mean, there is that kind of like awning there. So you would think he would, unless that thing is metal or something, if it's fabric, he would fall right through it,
Right.
potentially. But yeah, I mean, I don't discount the possibility that he could have been nimble enough, certainly at his weight. I mean, certainly that's he was strong enough to like be able to pull his own weight and do pull-ups and stuff.
Right. Well, I think another interesting detail that we definitely need to mention is that once basically Meredith, William, Florence, and Brian, once they returned to the Ugly Tuna Saloon after like the whole bar hopping trip, uh, I think really shortly after they returned to the Ugly Tuna Saloon, Brian sort of separated himself from his two patrons, and they couldn't really find him for like 2 hours or something like that while they were at the bar. So what was he doing for those 2 hours? I think it's definitely interesting. It's an interesting detail, because it's not like they just lost Brian like 5 minutes before the bar closed. They couldn't really locate Brian for like multiple hours prior to the bar closing.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. I didn't even think of that potentially that time could have been used by somebody to start preparing or finalizing the steps to make some kind of evasion, some kind of intentional disappearance, which
Right.
strangely enough is actually the theory that I'm leaning towards. Though once again, the disclaimer, especially to his brother, that you know, to imply this, of course, is to imply that somebody did something that was, potentially pretty cruel to their own family. So we're not saying that this is something that Brian would have done under a normal state of mind, nor are we saying that that's actually what happened. But I
Yeah.
think for sure it's worth
Yeah.
going down it because, they depending on what you read, apparently, including Wikipedia, apparently the police have something like three different theories at least of what happened to him,
Yeah.
and they haven't said
Hmm.
what they are, but they seem relatively convinced that they have some idea of what potentially happened to him. They just don't have proof. Um, so why don't we cover that real quick? Is intentional disappearance. So that we covered that for Michael Negrete as well. Is like,
Yeah.
here's a scenario. Um, you know, somebody has some kind of lifestyle choice they want to make, and maybe they feel pressure from their family to not do so. Certainly, it seems like it's maybe a high achieving family or on the trajectory to do so. And somebody that, you know, t- interestingly, it took him 6 years to get a Bachelor of Science in microbiology. And that feels long. Like normally, and I'm not a, I was an English major, so full disclosure, it may be very difficult to get a microbiology degree, and it may just be like someone may write in our comments, no, Glenn, you don't know. It takes like you have to take like 10 extra classes or something. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's but like 6 years is like what you would do for like a combined bachelor and master's program.
Yep.
Like
yep.
at some place like UCLA. Yeah. So that's a little interesting. It makes you wonder if he kind of took his time with that, and maybe if he was kind of trying to signal to his family by I'm not saying he was dragging his feet, but from the outside, it looks like he was dragging his feet a little bit. Either that, or maybe his mother having cancer, because it looks like it took some time for her to die, but then she kind of died suddenly at the end. Maybe the impact of things like that were kind of distracting him from his studies, and maybe he had other responsibilities with the family, given what was happening, that slowed him down. So there's lots of good reasons, I guess, to not finish a degree in 4 years.
Well, yeah, like the more you're talking about like the theory that Brian actually started a new chapter in his life, or something like that, or like a new life path. But now that I think about it, I think it could be a possibility that maybe Brian actually decided to, he had the intentions of like getting away for like, I don't know, maybe like a year or two from everyone, just pack up and just leave everyone for a couple of years, and then he would probably return and get closer to everyone again. But maybe he actually did start a new life, and something tragic happened to him, once he started living that new life. That could also be a possibility, because the only reason I find it really, really difficult to believe in the theory that Brian actually started a new life and just sort of left everyone behind. I just can't see how he could just leave his family behind like that, Randy, his father, and Derek especially. And when you think about it, it could be the case that right after, maybe like he was really devastated by his mother's passing away, essentially, that he wanted to get away from everyone for a couple of years. And in those couple of years, his father, Randy Schaeffer, also passed away, and maybe that was a breaking point for him. And then he did something bad to himself. Then maybe that could have been the case. What I'm trying to say. Maybe he was like ready to return to everyone, and then he heard the news about his father, and maybe that's what when he decided to like either really get away from everyone for forever, or maybe he did something bad to himself. But this is just all speculation. It's just brainstorming on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly was not beyond the age where prominent psychological issues, things like schizophrenia or other kind of debilitating illnesses, mental illnesses, crop up.
Right.
He certainly was still well within the envelope of where something like that could happen. And then I mean losing your mother, it's kind of hard to like overestimate how powerful that could be. I thought of something. There's a famous boxing match here in the United States where back in the late, I think it was 1990, Mike Tyson fought Buster Douglas, and Buster Douglas was, like a mediocre heavyweight fighter at best. And Mike Tyson was undefeated. He was a monster. He could not be stopped. If you watch those fights, he is just an unstoppable force. And Buster Douglas lost his own mother almost exactly, I think, the same time frame, about 3 weeks before the fight.
Hmm.
And it's worth pulling up this fight on YouTube, because once you watch Mike Tyson's other fights and then watch Buster Douglas, like a man on a mission. Like his mother died, and it was like the ships are burning behind him. Like he almost like he had nothing to lose. And it's fascinating because after this fight, so he wins the fight. It's an amazing fight to watch. He takes apart Mike Tyson. It's the only time, at least at that point, that you ever saw anyone not just handle Mike Tyson expertly, but like defeat him
Yeah.
expertly. And interestingly, that was his single best moment in his boxing career, because the before and after that, he never was really that great a fighter. He didn't really seem to have the enthusiasm. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, it can create so much unpredictability in someone's mental state. So the other thing I was thinking of is, like, like you and I, we think about this and we think about either Michael Negrete or in this case, and it's like it just seems like such a cruel, weird, or irrational thing to, especially when you have so much going for you, um, to dash off somewhere and create a new life, especially if there's no evidence of like mental issues or hidden agendas. I will say that there is some evidence of kind of a hidden agenda, because unlike Michael Negrete, who was, it seems like, going to school for what he wanted to do, there's some evidence that Brian was not really on the path that he wanted. And so I would make the case that we don't know what kind of pressure from his family and also from his fiance, and no offense, Alexis, we're just speculating, but like, think about how that would be. So he's lost his mother, and then he's like, well, I don't really want to finish this doctor thing. Well, like, sometimes when someone's going to marry you, um, they may have factored in like what your future career is going to be. I mean, I know, like, I don't think my wife would have necessarily married me if I was going to do a job that maybe was like super low income,
Yeah.
or not predictable even. Like I when I married my wife, she was an immigrant, and certainly like we had some very good reasons to try to get a strong household income. But instead of, I'd been like, oh, I'm going to go be a stand-up comic and make like $50 a day for the next 3 years, that would have been incompatible with
Right.
like
Yeah.
her plan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, it definitely makes a lot of sense. Maybe like, especially when Brian lost his mother, like the pressure was crazy because he had exams like what, like a few weeks or something like that. Yeah, right. So like, excuse me, like really tough exams or something like that. So maybe he actually really did decide, like, I can't do this. This is not for me. Like the medical school is not for me. I'll just probably just go and start a new life, or something like that, or I just need to like really get away. Maybe that was his mindset, at the Ugly Tuna Saloon on that night. That definitely could be the case. I see where you're coming from. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially so like the U.S. medical system is I think in some ways um, has challenges that maybe other medical systems don't in other parts of the world, where there's like socialized medicine, and where I think there's it isn't just about the dollar. So in the United States, it's actually the case that there is a pretty high suicide rate for doctors and for veterinarians, because they're so busy. They are busy all the time. So like to your point, he had just done this huge cram session. I mean, and it's a very challenging curriculum. And then you look forward and you're like, oh wow, this is going to be some version of my life for the rest of my career. 10, 20, 30, 40 years, I'm going to be literally working my ass off if I think that I'm going to be able to, if I'm going to be able to pay off my student loan, and et cetera. Like right now, it is the point where like doctors are kind of getting worked to death in parts of the United States, and there's still a lot of communities that are actually underserved. Like don't
Right.
still don't have the doctors they need. So imagine that, like you almost have too much business, but like once you get on the hook, like I often feel sorry for my doctor, because he's pretty busy, and like I can only imagine, even when he goes on vacation, like he can't get away from it. He has so many patients that somebody's going to have a problem and someone's going to bother him and need a prescription refilled, etc. So yeah, compared to Michael Negrete, where he was far earlier and he was doing his music scholarship,
Right.
this person seems to be doing something that was not super compatible with where his interests aligned. Just
Yeah.
one last thing, and then I'll get off the intentional disappearance topic. This reminded me where there was a case, and unfortunately, I think because a minor was involved, they've kind of erased the presence of it on the web. So, like sometimes somebody under 18 will go missing, and there'll be a big search, and then they'll find the person, and it'll be in the news that they found the person, so you can stop looking. But then
Yeah.
after that, to protect the privacy of that person, they kind of disappear the articles because like minors, there's special kind of ethical things
Mm-hmm.
around, mentioning them. Anyway, I only mentioned that because there was a case a couple of years ago where a teenage girl who I think was on a student trip in like a national park with her class or like a camp or something like that, she went missing. And that day, while they were searching, they found her. And when they found her, she had cut her own hair, she had changed her outfit, and she was wearing a hat, and she was trying to sneak out
Mm.
of the area with another group of people. And it was totally like, this fascinated me because I'm like, well, why would someone do that? What's the reasoning behind that? And I think because it was, somebody who was a minor, they didn't ever follow up on that. We never got kind of the answers to our questions. But once again, it's like, gosh, somebody who on paper had no reason to do that did that. And there was actually another guy here in California, I think, who gosh, he disappeared from like someplace really far away. I think it was like a ski resort, and then he
Yeah.
turned up here in California with like his ski outfit still on. A trucker had given him a ride to like somewhere here in California, and this guy had no idea. He had no explanation for what happened or why he did it. So literally, he was on a ski trip. He was with his friends, disappears, and then like a week later, turns up in California after hitchhiking with semi truckers, and it happens. Sometimes it just. So imagine if that person
Yeah,
was snap out of it.
especially for someone like Brian who was overworked and had so much, happening in his life at the same time. So who knows what his mental state was. His friends stated that, and he, just in general, he seemed like he was in a fairly okay mental state, but no one really knows for sure because only Brian could say how he really felt at that point. So yeah, definitely. So like what other like prevalent or like realistic theories have we not mentioned? Do you have
Yeah,
any more?
I mean, so I have one last one, and I only mention it. I don't particularly find it credible, but I don't want to just totally discount it. So there's something called the Smiley Face Serial Killer.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I didn't really look into the other smiley face killer. Killer like victims or anything like that. I didn't really do too much research, but from what I've gathered, it's like really far fetched, and the police they don't really consider it as a legit theory. So yeah, that's I have like the same opinion about it. Like I don't really see the connection, but maybe you know something that I don't.
No, I'm on the same page as you. Though I do look forward to any kind of rebuttal or feedback from our listeners on this topic. But yeah, the smiley
Yeah.
face thing's pretty controversial. So just to recap for listeners, and I think maybe it might be worth in a future episode us doing a little bit of a deeper dive. But
Hmm.
the theory is that there's kind of this series of men that are approximately Brian's age. It's all men who are kind of like either in college or around college age, or in his case maybe grad student age or medical student age, and they have turned up dead in waterways, so like rivers, specifically, and as you mentioned, Juras, it's there is a prominent river there, and I
Right.
think this is one of the rivers where they had found a couple people. So the theory is that these deaths that have been listed as or determined to be accidental are not, that there's some kind of secret serial killer who's maybe like poisoning or sedating people, young men specifically. There's something like 45 different cases that these two individuals who have come up with this theory have tried to tie this theory to, and their evidence. I think they have a bunch of different things. Like I guess even Oprah's Oxygen Network has covered the theory, but the theory is that there's some kind of person that does these killings and then puts a smiley face at, I guess, what they presume is the scene of the crime. And yeah, like you said, it's pretty shaky right now. And I'll also point out that like a smiley face is probably like literally the most common symbol that anybody with like
For like a graffiti, right? Yeah.
yeah, for anything. I mean, even small children is like the first thing you learn. So I don't know. It would be like saying like the letter A killer, because there's so many graffiti tags with the letter A in it
Yeah.
next to the. It's like I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. It's far fetched to say the least. Yeah, like I'm glad that you actually mentioned it because I've completely forgotten about that theory in particular. So yeah, but I don't think that would happen. Like for me personally, I think it's either it's I'm leaning towards that he Brian actually left the ugly tuna saloon somehow undetected by the security cameras, and something unfortunate happened to him. Either he there was a lot of construction being done around that general vicinity, so maybe he just stumbled into some sort of a pit or something like that, and then he passed away in there. Or maybe he got mugged because the area was the crime rate in that area was fairly substantial. So yeah, I'm leaning towards that, and I'm also not discounting the fact that Brian actually decided to leave everyone behind, at least for a short period of time. And then once he found out that his father had passed away by a freak accident, he, that's just seems like a lot for one person to take in. Both of your parents dying within like 2 years, and then he probably either got even drunker or something like that. And not saying that he was a drunk or anything like that. He seemed like a really smart man, but maybe the loss of both of his parents really was really hard on him, especially at his young age. And yeah, so those are like the two theories that I'm going with. And the smiley killer one, I would definitely disregard. So that's my general take on the whole case.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty similar in terms of the theories that I think hold the most water. So yeah, the misadventure. I'm leaning more away from it than the Michael Negri case, just because, like I mentioned, there was just less construction going on. It was a little closer. It was interesting because on Reddit, people were kind of going through the scenario we talked
Mm,
about,
yeah.
the laying concrete scenario, and there were, like, once again, this isn't my area of expertise. They were saying that, oh, you couldn't hide a body under concrete well because um, like once the body decayed, the concrete would collapse. And they said that the laying concrete is a multi-person operation that requires a lot of leveling, and it's kind of a more complex process than I guess the layman would
Yeah.
consider. I mean, so my only retort to that is, if that's true, then how come we haven't found Jimmy Hoffa yet? Uh,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. And before we wrap up the podcast, we almost forgot there is a Brian Schafer. Find brianschafer.com. It's a website set up for just in general to find Brian Schafer, or at least to find out what happened to this man on 2006. So yeah, if like any of our listeners have any sort of like tips or like details or anything like that, you can definitely visit this website. We will leave the link in the description. they have a phone line that you could leave tips, and you could also remain anonymous while you do that. So every little bit helps. And yeah, if you have some sort of information about Brian's whereabouts, or what actually happened to him, then please, please, please contact the people who are trying to actively find Brian. Definitely. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, and it's worth calling out that he could still be out there. I mean, under these scenarios, someone could have lost their mental sanity. He might be one of those homeless people that like no one pays attention to, that sort of is blends into the background, and kind of like society right now doesn't really care for. I mean, gosh, it would be at least a bittersweet resolution if
Right.
maybe somebody did spot somebody, on,
Mhm.
on the street here in LA or Chicago or any other major metros, and was like, oh, look, this guy looks exactly like, Brian Schaeffer.
Yeah.
13 years later, it would be so wonderful if, we were able to reunite what's left of his family.
Would be great. Yeah, definitely. So I'm thinking we are pretty much wrapping up the episode. So yeah, if you have any sort of like other theories, or just in general you want to like discuss this topic with us more in depth, you can definitely leave a comment in the YouTube comment section. Yeah, you can follow us on our social media accounts. We post videos every week. We are a weekly true crime / mystery podcast, the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. So yeah, anything you want to let our viewers know before we sign out, Glenn?
Just thank you for all your comments on our other episodes and the feedback. It really helps us, I think, identify what's the most enjoyable for everyone to listen to. And we really appreciate also, a better understanding that we get from our audience. So, once again, thank you for listening to us then and now.
Yeah, definitely. And if you don't mind, guys, can you leave a like on this episode, as well as if you enjoy the content, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It definitely helps us a lot in terms of ranking here on YouTube, because we are still a fairly new channel, a fairly new podcast. So every little bit definitely helps. So yeah, like the content, subscribe to our YouTube channel, obviously, if you enjoy the content. And yeah, we will catch you on the next episode, which will be up next week. So yeah, take it easy, guys, and peace out.